I would like to thank first the Leilon Area Gazette hosting this hosting this event, especially for I'm told by the host that this mainly aimed at aspirants. I would like to combine this talk for aspirants as well as people who are in need of services, healthcare services, since that's the area that I'm working here in Government of Manipur right now. And to begin with, about a little about myself, my background. Um, Although I'm an IAS officer, as the host mentioned, I'd like to think myself more as a writer, more than anything else, because that's where my passion lies. As far as family background is concerned, both my parents are doctors, and we are the chief of a village in Churchandpur district called Sialbu. And I have a great love for nature, for virtually all things natural, and yet at the same time, almost everything roses my curiosity. Curiosity, that's a very important element. That's very important. The desire to know, the desire to explore. That's a very important trait, especially for someone who wants to be prepared to study and to become an IAS officer. Now, regarding my journey, it can be looked at in several different ways, but from the motivational aspect, not to demotivate at all, but to look at it from the perspective of somebody who wants to do something important in his life before we leave this earth. I would say that it is one more of mental struggle rather than physical struggle. I've been blessed enough among so many other people to be blessed with doctors, with parental doctors who provided for all physical needs, for virtually all physical needs, I should say. But mental struggle, that's an entirely different thing because it's very individualistic. It is just about you and yourself because it's you and how you control your behavior and your emotions. And that is where most of my struggle lies while I was a child and as I grew up. The first shock in my life, it happened when I was in class 11. Up till class 10, I had been studying in my hometown, Churchandpur, and I come from the Paite tribe. And I was in my comfort zone with friends, lots of friends, good family, good relatives, and everything. And then suddenly, when I was transported by my parents to study in New Delhi to stay in a boarding school, that was the first jolt that happened. It was a strange new experience. And the reason why I mention this particular experience is that it is important in life to step outside our comfort zones. Every human being, all of us, we have our own comfort zones. For me, initially, my comfort zone was my family and was my friends and my hometown. And to come out of it, because I had a very happy childhood, I had a very happy and contented childhood, and to step out of it and suddenly to be mixed with these mainstream Indians whom we call Mayangs and thrown into a hostel for that matter, that was the first shock. Navigating through it was difficult initially, but somehow it happened. And in life, one of the things that I recognized quite early is that there is no such thing as big struggle or small struggle. What is important in our struggle is that there is no objectively big or small struggle, but whether it's big or not, it depends on our response to it. Something, a struggle that looks very small, might be very big for someone else, and something very big might be very small for someone else. And so it's all in the mind and how you handle with it. After studying, uh, I passed out from a school called the Air Force School where I stayed in a hostel, and after that I was in Stephens. I was fortunate enough to get that college. But again, the important thing that I want to emphasize for people who do not get good colleges or colleges that they hope for or the subjects that they hope for is that colleges do not matter that much in the long run, especially in this social media age. Like what happens right now, because of this lockdown, many positive things are happening, especially in the world of the internet. Online classes are happening, online coaching are happening. Even before this, you have YouTube videos where different types of subjects are being showcased and amazing motivational as well as subject based and domain expert speakers are giving and sharing their knowledge. So colleges, traditionally speaking, traditional colleges with physical classrooms and all whatnot have lost half of the importance that it used to have even in my days. So even those who do not get good colleges, you will neither have the excuse nor the grievance for not being successful or for not aspiring and fulfilling your ambition enough. You cannot blame your college anymore this day and age. Internet has sufficient materials, it has sufficient videos, it has sufficient information for any type of discipline that you want to pursue in your life. So now to jump back again, when I was in Stephens, I took a subject, philosophy. Philosophy, I took it because it was my passion. That's the other important thing. For those, I assume that everyone who participate in this talk participates because you are interested to be either a civil servant or at least academically inclined. With this assumption in mind, let me tell you that when you pick your subject, it is important to pick a subject that feels right for you, that you have the passion for. There is no subject that is bad or worse or good or excellent. What matters ultimately, the subject that matters is the subject that should matter to you. It is you that's important, no one else. So if you're good in a subject, it might be Sanskrit also, it might be an MIL language also, it might even be painting, it doesn't matter. As long as you have the passion for it, the drive for it, and you are good in it, then that's the subject that's right and the best for you. So that's important. And on that line, I choose philosophy as the subject which I should study, and I should say that I made the right decision when I did that. I had huge passion for the subject that I've been crazy for it even after I become a civil servant. So that even today, I keep writing books about philosophy, and you can expect my second book to come out as soon as this lockdown is over. Now, as for civil service preparations, I did not really begin preparations in civil service until I completed my studies, I mean, my graduation. Okay, talking about my subjects, I move around virtually all the social sciences and humanities. I took philosophy in graduation. For masters, which I took philosophy in graduation, and then in JNU, my entrance exam, I gave it in modern history because that's one of the few subjects that fascinates me, and I got admission in JNU for modern history, and I was admitted in Narmada Hostel, but I didn't join it. I decided to prepare for civil services instead. Then for my master's, I continued doing sociology after I became an IAS officer, and lots of people were asking me why I want to continue my further studies. Well, it's just my passion, and that's why I decided to do it. After completing my master's, I cleared NET examination. I got GRF. In fact, I was ranked third in that exam. Thought I would top it, but I wasn't third. After that, I continued to pursue PhD in political science. In for my this thing, For my civil service subject, I took philosophy and geography. In our time, we still had two optionals, so geography was the other subject. So graduation I did in philosophy, then masters in sociology, then for in JNU, I did in modern history, and then geography in my civil service, and for PhD, I'm doing political science right now. My thesis in political science for PhD, which I'm halfway through it, and hopefully after 1.5 years from now, I'll be Dr. H. Guite. But my subject is on social media, incidentally, very relevant to what we are doing right now, on social media and its relationship with politics. Anyway, so that's briefly my academic bio, but about my struggles. I was fortunate that I took philosophy as my optional as well as my graduation subject because I'm very good in it. I'm not boasting here, but I think it's a matter of fact that I would like to say that I'm better in that subject than most people. But that's not because I have a certain special ability for it, but because it's my passion. Philosophy is my passion. And if I understand a philosophical argumentation once, then I can go on and on. So the same subject that I took in graduation, that's also the very same subject I took in civil services. And I would say that philosophy has become increasingly relevant for civil service aspirants because there are two papers in civil service right now which are regarded to be the core subdisciplines of philosophy. One is logic, which is essential in CSAT, and the second is ethics. Philosophy has 6 core subdisciplines. One of them is logic, the other is ethics. And logic and ethics, both of them are essential readings, essential subjects for civil service aspirants today. So anyway, I took philosophy because it's my passion, and I took the same subject again in civil service, which is why I did not have to study that much when I prepared for civil services as far as the subject philosophy is concerned. Now regarding the preparations, it was really very strange. Much of my preparations during, especially on the year that I cleared the service, because I suffered from various illnesses. And in this day and age, especially in this lockdown, illness is a very dangerous thing, especially if you have this pandemic. But in my time, when I prepared for it, it was in 2010-11. I suffered from a variety of illnesses. It almost made me wonder whether I was bound to suffer through all the illnesses. First, I had dengue fever. And before I had dengue fever, I had swine flu also. I had swine flu and then I had dengue fever. But it was the timing that was particularly bad for me. I had swine flu when I started preparation, so that was not that bad. But then after I finished my prelims and I was preparing for mains examination, 1 month before the mains exam began, I suffered from dengue or dengue, whatever it is. Yeah, from dengue fever. It was quite serious. I fell on the bathroom floor. I was unconscious. They brought me to the hospital. God saved me. I survived. And then 1 month before my interview date, sorry, 1 week before my interview date, I had an internal bleeding, which disrupted much of my mental preparation. Interview is all about mental preparation. And that internal bleeding really, really disturbed me psychologically. But I was very fortunate again, since I can now be sitting here with you giving this speech. But on the struggling side, in life, there is absolutely nothing that is worth having without struggle. You have to struggle through almost everything. That struggle, much of it may not be known to the outside world. You might imagine that because both my parents are doctors, I am more well placed than many of you, perhaps even here itself, that perhaps I do not struggle as much as most people do. But I would like to say that I have different type of struggle, most of which are mental. And I can't go into all the details of that, but these struggles, you have to overcome them in order to prepare yourself for anything worthy. In this particular case, for civil services. It is very important in life that whatever you do, you not give up. That's another trait that I would like to cultivate on everyone. Intelligence is a blessing from God. How intelligent you are or how intelligent you are not, there's almost nothing that you can do about it. But your character, especially your hard work, especially the way you respond to struggles, the way you deal with your problems, that's entirely you. You can't blame anyone, you can't even blame God. So yes, you should first evaluate yourself. What are your strengths and your weaknesses? And on that basis, see the struggles which are worth fighting and things that are worth keeping behind. For me, I was always very clear about my abilities and the battles that I should fight. In this particular case, as far as academics is concerned, I always imagine myself sitting as some professor in some university in America. And I also got a very good scholarship for studying in Harvard and Notre Dame University, which I decided not to pursue in order to prepare for civil services instead. I don't regret the decision. Of course, sometimes I do think about what my life will be had I decided to take that offer instead. It was an offer, I did not even have to apply for it. But then I had set my priorities because I want to struggle. I want a different type of struggle for my life as such, where I struggle together with my family and with our people, with our community. So I decided to take up civil services instead, although perhaps life would be far more comfortable if one were in some foreign university and working from there. Anyway, so when I prepared for the civil services, one of the basic problems that every civil servant, a service aspirant will face is what to study and what not to study. What I've found is that although struggle, you should be prepared to struggle and deal with those struggles. What is equally important is that there are some struggles that you do not have to face if you are sufficiently smart enough. That is, in terms of studies, what to study and what not to study. Although it's important to know what to study, it is equally important to know what not to study. In fact, I would say that what not to study is more important at the initial stage when you begin your preparation. Because what not to study is so vast, and yet what you have to study is much more limited. The entire stock of human knowledge is very vast, but it's not possible for a single human being to know everything. So, how do you exclude what to study and what not to study? How do you make the demarcation? That requires a very smart move. I can't tell everything here, but some of the things is first, the point is you have to know what your civil service syllabus is all about. And you can know that first by checking the notification, UPSC notification that keeps coming about the syllabuses. Secondly, by looking at past question papers. One of the trends that you'll notice with past question papers, especially in optional, is that they tend to ask the same questions again and again, as far as some big marker questions are concerned. Like, for example, I took geography. In geography, if you're going to prepare your optionals in geography, you definitely need to know what plate tectonics is about. You cannot study physical geography without knowing plate tectonics. So you have to know everything about plate tectonics. You have to know everything there is to know about earthquakes, about volcanoes, about landforms, because these are subjects where the same questions in various different ways get repeated again and again. So they might be repeated in different forms, but your preparation be such that you should be prepared to answer those questions regardless of how much they twist the questions. For example, taking the same instance again about plate tectonics. One year they might ask you one question about, say, critically explain the theory of plate tectonics as it evolves. The next year it might say describe the plate tectonics, what the theory of plate tectonics is. The next year, or perhaps even the same year, they might ask evaluate the evidences for plate tectonics. Or they might give you these days, they are more concerned with the application aspect, it seems, looking the past 2-3 years trend. So they might ask you questions like, for example, recently we have faced a number of small earthquakes all around Mizoram and Manipur. Some 5-6 earthquakes have been recorded recently. So the question can be, why do earthquakes occur along this northeast provincial mountain lines like this Mizoram, Nagaland, this line, but why does it not occur, for example, in Madhya Pradesh? Why is there no earthquake in Karnataka, but why are there lots of earthquake in Delhi, in Nepal? So the question might be, why are earthquakes occurring along the Himalayan ranges? Explain this in light of the theory of plate tectonics. So that's possible. That is an application-based question. So my point is that in every subject has a core theory, a core component to it. That core component, you must master it from different angles, so that whatever questions come, you will be able to answer it about that core component. That's how you know what to study. And about what not to study, the other thing is that it is not important for you to go to specialize in a particular subject just because you're very interested. For example, in biology, in evolutionary theory, or in reproduction or reproductive biology, doesn't mean that you should try to be a specialist in that subject. In civil service, at least in the IAS, why it's called the IAS? Why is it that every other service, like for example, Indian Revenue Service, it has, what do IRS officers deal with? They deal with revenue. What do IPS officers deal with? They deal with policing, law enforcement. What do foreign officers deal with? They deal with foreign affairs. But how about the IAS? The IAS deals with everything, right? That's why it deals with administration as a whole. It deals also with policing. It deals also with law, with revenue. It deals also with foreign affairs. It deals with virtually everything. That is why it's called administrative service. So if your aspiration is to become an IAS officer, then you must prepare to be a generalist. You must specialize in generality. You know, if you want to use the word specialist, then you must specialize in generality. So that's important. Specialization in generalities is what the IAS is all about, and that's the character that the UPSC looks at when it sets its question papers. That is why aptitude test CSAT questions, they will ask you the most basic questions about logic and about quantitative aptitude or about analytical reasoning. They won't ask you deep questions. They won't ask questions about calculus in mathematics. Or they won't ask you questions about genetics in biology or about neurology. Or they won't ask you questions in any other field that you pick, deep questions they won't ask. The reason is IAS officer is supposed to know something about everything. You see, the difference between generalist and specialist is the specialist is meant to know everything about something. So he specializes in a tiny portion out of the entire stock of knowledge. He knows everything about that tiny portion, but knows nothing else. That's what a specialist is. And a specialist has its uses. A generalist, on the other hand, knows knows something about everything. So he knows something about everything, but if you were to ask a deeper question about that something, he won't be able to tell you the details. But he will be able to join every conversation. He will be able to make educated conclusions about almost every argumentation or about almost every type of subject. And that is the character which is being looked at. That is the quality that is being looked at in an IAS officer. That is why what I mentioned in the beginning, curiosity, that's very important for an IAS aspirant. You should be curious about everything. Although it's impossible to know everything, you should at least have the drive to be curious about anything, because as an IAS officer, you can get posted in any department, and the department that you were posted now may have absolutely nothing to do with the next department. For example, if before I landed up here in Manipur, I was the special commissioner of commercial taxes. And when I land up here, I'm dealing with health, which I never dealt with before. I'm also dealing with water resources and minor irrigation, both of which I've never dealt with before, irrigation and flood control. But that's where the specialist and generalist division of labor comes into play. For example, in minor irrigation. As an IAS officer, the IAS officer is not expected to know the technical details of constructing dams or designing agricultural fields and river banks and whatnot. But the IAS officer is expected to make educated evaluation of various proposals that come to the table about where minor irrigation should be done, about where a dam should be built. Because when you build a dam, for example, in water resources, like we built Kuganam here, when you build a dam, it's not just an engineering issue out there. Although dam construction is, yes, definitely engineering issue is there, but there are environmental issues also at play. Lots of land will be flooded and submerged. What do we do with the flora and fauna that gets destroyed there? It's not just about environment again. It's also about social issues. Lots of lands will get submerged. So how do we rehabilitate the villages whose village might be submerged because of the dam? And it's not just the social issue again. It's also about labor issue. Like you are looking at the aspect whether this dam can generate more livelihood or destroy livelihood. An IAS officer is supposed to look at all these different angles. A specialist, because he is a specialist, will look at things from his special perspective. An engineer will approach the issue of constructing dam from the perspective of engineering. An environmentalist will look at things from the perspective of forestry. A sociologist or a social scientist might look at things from the perspective of rehabilitation. An IAS officer, on the other hand, is supposed to collect all these expert opinions together. These domain experts, is supposed to bring all their stock of knowledge together, then come up with a seamless solution that will be the least unsatisfactory, or let's say the most satisfactory for everyone involved. And the same thing with health, because most problems in society, they do not happen in silos. They do not happen in isolation. Most problems in society are all interconnected, which is why an IAS officer is essentially a coordinator. He coordinates between one department and another department, between one specialist and another specialist, between one domain and another domain. Because an IAS officer is trained to look at things from the broader perspective. The expert looks at the trees and the individual trees themselves, whereas an IAS officer looks at the whole ecosystem. So that's why your preparation, when you prepare for civil services also, you should look at it from that angle, because they're not going to ask you questions. They're not going to ask you questions that are so deep that it will have no administrative effect. You will be expected to know general awareness knowledge. You will be expected to have good reasoning abilities. You will be expected to have a good ethical sense, the desire to help people. But you won't be expected to be a master. The only thing you'll be master at is administration, not particular subject areas. So whatever your background might be, you might be a doctor, but once you prepare for civil services, your domain is no longer biology, it's no longer medicine. It is now everything as a whole. You might be an engineer, but your domain is no longer engineering. You might be from humanities background, but your domain is not just humanities anymore, but it's everything. That's what a civil servant is supposed to do, to be prepared for anything that the government decides to throw on you, because an IAS officer is supposed to move around all the departments. He's like a chameleon, an IAS officer. He doesn't have a real color. Changes color from one department to the next all the time. So yes, that's what the IAS is all about, and that's where the preparation should also factor in, which you should also factor in when you prepare. The other thing when you prepare is, what is important is that it's not so much about how many hours you study as much as it is about what you put into those hours. It is the hours that count. It is what you put into the hours that count, not the hours themselves. When you study when you have the passion for it, and try to connect what you study with your real life experience. For example, if you're studying about history, then try to connect with real life events. We right now have a pandemic. We're in the middle of pandemic. So when you study about the pandemic and you are looking at it from a historical perspective, try to also see whether there are pandemics in the past. Try to connect it together. What was the first pandemic in recorded history? Probably, I think it was around in the 5th century BCE, when one of the Greek historians recorded of a pandemic that broke out in Athens. Or how about the pandemic called the Plague of Justinian that wiped out about 1/4 of the world's population? Or how about the severest pandemic of all in human history, the Black Death, that started from China, just like the present pandemic, incidentally, and then spread across Europe and wiped out almost 1/3 of European population. Can you imagine that? Over 100 million people died over the course of a century because of the Black Death. So then, most recently, we have the Spanish flu, which was the severest pandemic that occurred in the world in the 20th century. So yes, real life events, contemporary events, know how to connect these events with history. Because the other thing in civil service is you are expected to be updated with your knowledge, and yet at the same time to connect the dots, in knowledge, in things that are happening. You're expected to not just do rote learning anymore. One misconception about the civil service examination these days is that it's all about rote learning. No, it's not. It is not. Most of the questions these days, if you look at them, you have to apply your mind. Application of mind is absolutely critical, because straight questions are no longer there. They are not going to ask questions like what happened in the Battle of Plassey, or who won this battle or who won that battle. No, these were questions asked probably in the 90s or maybe the early 2000s, but not since then. They'll ask us trickier questions, like, for example, could the Battle of Plassey prevent the European imperialism? You have to apply your mind. Just because you write your opinion doesn't mean that your opinion counts. You have to use the facts of history to write about your opinion. Your opinion has to be backed up by facts, and that requires an application of mind. So these are some of the things that I want to share. Now, um, well, I'll take questions because I don't know exactly which trust the audience wants to move me to. But before that, I would like to speak for 5 minutes regarding this Ayushman Bharat. Like I said, an IAS officer is expected to be a specialist, therefore, he should be prepared to work and study and also learn as much as he can about whatever new department he or she is placed in by the government and have the passion for it. Now I'm in health department as the CEO of state health agency that deals with Ayushman Bharat. That doesn't mean that I'm a doctor or that I have the ability like a doctor to know about illnesses or diseases. But knowing how to treat a patient is very different from managing the treatment, how the treatment goes. And our duty is not to treat a patient, but to ensure that the patient gets properly treated. I hope you notice the difference. So about Ayushman Bharat, it is an insurance scheme launched by the government of India, and it was implemented in Manipur by the government of Manipur in September 2018. It is a health insurance scheme that covers all eligible families and provides up to 5 lakhs rupees worth of free hospitalization. The good thing about Ayushman Bharat is if you're suffering from some illnesses and you need some surgery, or you need some type of serious treatment, maybe dialysis treatment, or maybe eye care, or maybe something perhaps even close to terminal or even terminal, up to 5 lakhs rupees, you don't have to spend anything. And not only that, a hospital, if it is empaneled to treat these Ayushman patients, then they cannot charge you anything in addition. It might cost a non-beneficiary 10-15 lakh rupees, but if you're a beneficiary, they have to spend a maximum of around 5 lakhs rupees, and they cannot charge you money for that. It's free hospitalization treatment. That is why I'm so excited about this scheme, because we have so many among us who are less privileged, who cannot afford to travel to Delhi, who cannot perhaps even afford to go to our most renowned hospitals like Caesar Hospital. But now this wonderful scheme says that any hospital treatment will be free up to 5 lakh rupees if you are a beneficiary. That is why I encourage you, especially those people, those aspirants who are too poor to even afford proper books. If you are poor enough, I'm sure your name will be there. Register for it in Ayushman Bharat and ensure that you and your family are protected. Remember, this 5 lakh insurance coverage covers not just you, but the entire family, right? No matter the size of the family, no matter how large or no matter how small, up to 5 lakh rupees hospital treatment, you'll get it for free. This includes your surgery cost, includes the cost of your stay in the hospital, includes doctors, consultancy, it even includes medicinal cost, both pre-hospitalization as well as hospitalization, up to 5 lakh rupees. Now, recently in Churchandpur Hospital, they have started dialysis treatment. So I've written a letter to Churchandpur District Hospital as well as to the other district hospitals also, that dialysis treatment that happens. This again is thanks to a principal secretary who ensured that every hospital now has dialysis treatment, every district hospital. Now we have encouraged the hospitals, in fact, we have instructed the hospitals to ensure that PMJY patients, Ayushman Bharat patients who require dialysis treatment are treated in these hospitals. In Churchandpur, they have started the process already, and dialysis patients are getting free treatment there. Also, for these enrollment purposes, we have started this new initiative that, as we know, because of the lockdown, social distancing is required and physical contact should be minimized. Therefore, biometric fingerprinting, which is required, which is essential, even for Ayushman enrollment and for so many other things, have been currently not allowed, currently forbidden by the government in Manipur. So to circumvent that problem, we have introduced this initiative of iris scanning, where instead of fingerprinting, we scan your eyesight without physical contact. From a distance of about 3 inch, this scanning is happening. So that way, we ensure that enrollment continues to happen. Enrollment for Ayushman Bharat continues to happen, even if there is no fingerprinting. And that's a new initiative we have introduced. And Churchandpur District Hospital has already activated its iris scanner devices, and we have just written a letter to start using this iris scanning device, iris recognition device. The other district hospitals will also follow shortly. Thank you for listening patiently. I'll take the questions now.